Yo, what's going on, guys? And recently we heard a report coming from USA Today Sports Network that multiple sources have told them that the Bucks are interested in point guard Ja Morant of the Memphis Grizzlies. Ja Morant is 26 years old and he's had a up and down year this year. He is making $39.5 million and $42.2 million next season and has 44.9 in the 27 to 28 season. They're also interested in Zach LaVine. We've talked at length about Zach LaVine, so we'll discuss that later. But it would both be similar trade packages, I think, because the salaries are similar, almost $40 million players, that the reason why they're trading for them is they're quote unquote distressed assets, meaning that they're two players that have long-term money. And I think Zach LaVine personally is the better fit, but Ja Morant is a player that is a former All-NBA caliber player who, if he can regain his form, now people will say like over the last few seasons, since like 3 years ago, he's kind of regressed, has had less paint touches, hasn't been as efficient, and the three-point shot, he's a career 31% three-point shooter. So with that being said, there's also the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel saying that the Bucks are interested in Ja Morant and Zach LaVine specifically. To me, I think when we look at this, we discussed the Ja Morant potential trade spots yesterday or the other day in a video where we broke it down, and we did say that the Bucks were a team that could be interested in a Ja Morant trade. Now, the reason why I think that would have to be a bit of the deal has to be Bobby Portis, Kyle Kuzma, either Cole Anthony, Ryan Rollins, or Kevin Porter Jr. Now, Kevin Porter and Ryan Rollins are more valuable than Cole Anthony. Gary Harris would also probably be in there just as salary filler. Like, to make any deal, Gary Harris, Kyle Kuzma, Bobby Portis is the three dudes for salary purposes that more than likely have to be included in the deal for either Zach LaVine or Ja Morant. This could be expanded into a bigger deal. So, like, if they didn't want to just trade either one or all those players to said location, either Sacramento or Memphis. Now, Bobby fits both teams needing, help in the front court. And I think you could also argue Kyle Kuzma gives both team forward depth and both players on cost-controlled contracts. I think Kevin Porter and Ryan Rollins have more value than Cole Anthony. Now, I think the Bucks would like to keep both Ryan Rollins and Kevin Porter Jr., but they're more valuable than Cole Anthony isn't in any trade. So, like, that's where it becomes hard to see, like, who would they really want to target and who could be a part of, I think, any sort of fit or like team that wants to bring in Ja or Zach. And what I meant for either one of the Bucks trade partner being either Sacramento for Zach LaVine, which again we'll talk later, but I know a lot of people would say is the best player in this scenario, because Zach LaVine is the floor spacer that they would need next to Giannis. And we know that Kyle Kuzma is someone that the Kings have had a long-standing interest in. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks are actually decent at spacing the floor this year under Doc Rivers, and I know a lot of people want to lament Doc Rivers for being an antiquated coach and not having grown with the game. But this year, he's actually Rajon Rondo's developed Ryan Rollins. Kevin Porter Jr. is doing a great job. This team is one of the better three-point shooting teams, almost 40% as a unit, making about 15 threes a night, though their assist numbers are lower than most the high motion teams, and they are a little bit slower on their ball movement. Ja Morant would create more paint pressures, and if they're able to keep most of those shootings, which Gary Bird, AJ Green, and Gary Trent Jr. and company, that's why you kind of want like Ryan Rollins, who's being a good three-point shooter, where like this is a team that right now they're a shoot first, pass second squad. I think Ja Morant would be able to create more openings, and they'd be able to stagger the minutes where they're still able to create paint touches whenever Giannis is off the floor or Ja's off the floor, because they can keep one together, keep one with each unit. So one starters with the second unit. So I think that's something that would really help them out. And I think the Bucks are just a team that would fit really well for Ja, as they're able to be one of, if not the faster transition teams. And the whole idea is that you're going to get Ja Morant cheaper than he would be on any other. Now, we don't know if he still has like the legs, but you have this downhill duo where both players hopefully are going to be great at creating rim pressure. And whenever Giannis sits, their rating has been dropping from being one of the more elite offenses in the leagues to subpar, and Morant provides that secondary on-ball creation they've lacked since the departure of Drew Holiday and the failed experiment with Damian Lillard. Morant would lead the fast break with Giannis as a trailer or a lob threat. They still have Miles Turner to space the floor, which basically is impossible to stop without fouling. Now, with the Bucks, they're going to rely heavily on this drive and kick scheme where three-point shooters surrounding Giannis and Morant, and currently Morant shooting 31% from deep, and clogging the paint with two non-shooters could allow the defenses to play a pack the paint zone, but you have Miles Turner to drag them out, and then you have Gary Trent and AJ Green to help space the floor. And with the collective cost of being Kyle Kuzma, Bobby Portis, Gary Harris, and one of the guards, hopefully Cole Anthony, you'd be able, first off, with Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis, you get to like 35. I think if just with Gary Harris, you're able to keep them, but I don't know if that's enough to be a trade sweetener. So that's why I'm thinking Kevin Porter or Mr. Ryan Rollins would have to be included. I assume probably Kevin Porter because he's on the shorter deal. He would be there to be the salary matcher, as Milwaukee's already struggling with perimeter defense and rebounding, swapping, a 6'9" forward and a 6'10", 6'11" big for the 6'1", 6'2" guard, who is one of the league's poor defenders, who could exasperate their defense. And Morant is defensively deficient, but you have Ryan Rollins and the other defenders on this roster, like Taurean Prince, who do you assume stay on the team to help keep him, I guess, afloat. And the other thing is Giannis and Miles Turner will also be the other guys to help anchor the defense. That I think they have enough wings that they'll allow for another ball-dominant player to be able, and offensive or defensively deficient, be able to stay afloat. Now, I think Doc Rivers would be able to keep the off-court baggage to a minimum. Memphis, to move Morant, the Bucks would likely have to include whatever draft assets or a young player to sweeten the deal. So to me, I think the biggest thing is that his rim pressure and playmaking would help this team. And I think offers a talent that Jeremy Grant and Kuminga don't. So I think the biggest thing is, so the idea is that you're getting a player that Jonathan Kuminga, Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons don't match. That's why I say Zach LaVine, and who we'll get into later. Because the Bucks, if they make this move, they are betting that the sheer talent and transition scoring can overcome whatever defensive and half-court spacing issues that might come with Morant. And then Morant would be able to fix what they lack in terms of having a bailout artist. That's what Chris Middleton used to do, be like that bailout artist for the Bucks, and they haven't had that. Now, the rest of this video will be the Zach LaVine discussion. It's a similar package of like Gary Harris and Bobby Portis and Kyle Kuzma for Zach LaVine. I just think that's a better fit. And now you have LaVine, Turner, and Giannis. And I think the problem I have with Ja Morant, I think if you can get him a cheap, yeah, that's fine. But athletically in the paint play, like the way his paint penetration isn't what it used to be. So that's like the concern you have there. So I don't know, man. That's where like I sit here and I wonder. So plus Zach LaVine's an easier contract to get off long term. You're not committing, and I don't think you would need a trade. I think you could just send Bobby Portis, Kyle Kuzma, and Gary Harris, and I think it's Cole Anthony to make the money work right there. I would do that in a heartbeat, especially if you can have like Keon Ellis thrown in the deal or somebody else to make it work from the Kings, because I think the Kings are just trying to get off that money while the Grizzlies are remaining steadfast and wanting like a young player and or draft assets for Ja and what we saw Trey being traded for. I just think just shows what the market value is. Now we'll talk about LaVine for the rest of the video. Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I wanted to talk about our boy Zach LaVine. And what do I have to say today about Zach LaVine? Milwaukee Bucks are 11-15, and they are performing their due diligence on Zach LaVine as a desperation move to salvage what might be turning into a disappointing season. And I talked about this earlier in the year. And the only way I see this happening is if this is the last Hail Mary attempt to save Giannis Antetokounmpo staying in Milwaukee. They currently rank 20th in net rating with a negative 2.9, and they shockingly 20th in defensive rating, 118. Their offense also lags at 20th with 115.1. This just shows a team that's mediocre on both ends of the floor. They need perimeter scoring to diversify an attack that's become too predictable. LaVine offers that specific skill set. It would have to be Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis, and I believe Gary Harris for Kyle Kuzma. And this itself, for a guy who's averaging 21 points on 39% from 3 on 7 attempts a game, he provides the floor spacing in the shot. Oh, I didn't mean to hit that. Shot creation that is necessary to open the lanes for Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Porter Jr., Ryan Rollins, and whoever it may be. However, the Kings also know that Zach LaVine has the negative asset or a neutral asset trade value due to the fact that he's on that $47.4 million salary. So this could be the cheapest deal that they could get for an all-star level player. And for a Kings that's already bottom tier, losing further assets to move a productive scorer is a difficult proposition. So if it allows them to clear the books and for them to get a guy back like Kyle Kuzma and Bobby Portis on more cost control contracts, then it helps for the inevitable rebuild that has to come. So the rest of the video will be what we talked about previous. Let me know your thoughts.
Yo, what's going on, guys? And today I wanted to talk about a report coming from my colleague Michael Scotto at HoopsHype. Yep, go check out our work at hoopshype.com. And he put out that the Bucks are keeping tabs on a potential Zach LaVine trade. And you're thinking, why would that? First off, the Kings have been connected to Kyle Kuzma for years, and Vivek Ranadivev and Kyle Kuzma just went in together on a volleyball league. And if you're wondering how the team or what would the trade be, basically the trade would have to be Kyle Kuzma, Bobby Portis, and Gary Harris for Zach LaVine. This is not even getting into the draft picks, which you can tell me, what would you think the draft picks would be? Now, let me tell you what Michael Scotto wrote. So this is what Scotto put out on hoopshype.com. Basically, the Milwaukee Bucks have conducted background due diligence on Zach LaVine and others around the league as usual. However, nothing is imminent as Bucks superstar Giannis Antetokounmpo nears a return from a low-grade abductor strain. Which, obviously, we all knew this part. Now, moving forward, what we know about the Bucks situation is if Milwaukee should become interested in LaVine, that Kyle Kuzma, Vivek Ranadivev news and link is something that we've all been aware of for the last few years, as I had just aforementioned. LaVine is averaging almost 22 points this year, or so far, who's averaged 22 points in his Kings tenure on efficient 51% and 43% from 3. And as a King so far, he's owed $47.5 million this season and just under $49 million in a player option for the 2026-27 season. So does that complicate things? I wouldn't say it complicates things, but it makes it very interesting when you look at it. And if you're a fan of the Bucks, I think they're a team that is in a position to be able to make a move, especially with the salaries that they have. Personally, if they could get themselves Zach LaVine, I mean, I've loved what Kevin Porter, I know Kevin hasn't been the healthiest, but Kevin Porter, Ryan Rollins, and I really, first off, and Cole Anthony, I think they've done an amicable job. I really like what they've been able to do as the team's guards. And they're more point guards, okay? And you would still be able to keep them if you were to do this trade. Sorry, I had an alarm go, but I think Bobby Portis is just a little bit starting to get over the hill. So if you're telling me you can, I think Kyle Kuzma's having a better year than he did last year. So with all of that being said, this would be, I think, an upgrade move. Like, if you're telling me you were able to turn Damian Lillard and Chris Middleton into Miles Turner, or yes, Damian Lillard and Kyle Kuzma at this point it would be, but you get what I'm saying. If you're telling me you were able to turn those two into Miles Turner and Zach LaVine, I think a lot of us would agree that that's a good deal. That's a deal that, especially with the draft pick situation given, now that you add that core to
what I mentioned earlier, the a Bucks team that is playing a lot better than what people would give you credit. And if I pulled up the Bucks stats right here, the Bucks this season are a team that outside of Giannis, look, we've talked a bunch at Ryan Rollins. If you guys have been following this channel, you know the videos we made discussing how amazing Ryan has been this season and how enjoyable it's been for me, just as a defender, as a scorer, as a creator. He's really been a part of this team in a way that I'm unhappy, and I think anyone who's a fan of the squad is impressed by how consistent. And shout out Rajon Rondo and the training staff for that. Even Kuzma's had some moments with Miles Turner. He's been the 3-and-D guy that they've needed, while also you have Gary Trent, Derry Bird, AJ Green. I know Kevin Porter's played one game, but he was good last year. Cole Anthony's been solid. So then I think once you start getting down the bench, that's where, like, after that, like, Taurean Prince, like, he's still, like, he's had his moments, but it's not like what he's been prior. So I sit here and I wonder, okay, if this deal were to be available and you're the Bucks, why wouldn't you do it? I think this is one of those times where it makes sense. Now, if you're the Kings, let's shift this conversation over to the Kings. I mean, Kyle Kuzma's contract's very affordable. He actually, in theory, would help solve some of the issues that you guys have, which defensively, and in theory, I mean, but at the same time, I just want to be clear that I don't think he would be this perfect solution, because I think the team is just kind of flawed. But man, it's also such a weird time, like, to be a Kings fan, because I like Doug Christie as a coach, but it goes to show this is just not a good constructed roster at all. Like, it's a very, very bad. And if I'm a guy like anyone on this team, we've seen how frustrated LaVine and DeMar DeRozan and Sabonis have been. I really think that's because this team's just not, and they're not even playing their best defender in Keon Ellis. It's really mind-numbing and head-scratching when you see them, because what is supposed to happen right here, like we've talked about this before, this is just a team that looks like the rule of insanity, doing different things and expecting different results, which to me is just almost like mind-numbing, because does that even work? Is it even worth it? It just feels like they're just dragging the Kings. Because I said already, if you're the Bucks, you do this deal. If you're the Kings, you do this deal because you need something, and it feels like the team's fracturing. But outside of that, yeah, like, I can't realistically see a reason why you would do that. Obviously, like, the Kings, like, right here, I guess in theory, again, we just said it, Bobby Portis, Kuzma, better cost control contracts, you'd be able to get off of Gary Harris's. But then again, it's a weird one where it doesn't really improve your situation. Does it really make anything better? I don't know if it does. That's, with that all said, I don't know. I just think it's one of those situations that we won't know what happens till maybe post December 15th, probably January. I know the restriction for recently signed players is lifted on the 15th of December, but that's still too early for most teams to do a trade. And if things were really to start to happen, I would think it'd be closer to January or post New Year's, just because that's how the way the NBA operates. But I think it is something to monitor, especially if you're a fan of either team, if you want to see the reset, or if you want to see the Bucks continue to get, like, this is a really good Bucks team. Giannis Antetokounmpo looks insane. I think they did a good job of retooling the roster the best that they could, and finding moves like this, if they are able, because a player of LaVine's caliber won't be this cheap typically. And given the circumstances, I would say this makes sense if you were to jump on it. Let me know your thoughts.